I want to first introduce our first speaker, Dr. Blaise Aguirre, who is a psychiatrist, the medical director of the 3 East program, Girls Residential Treatment Program, DBT, for suicidal and self-harming young women, and an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. He's going to frame the context for these alarming rates of suicide attempts and non-suicidal self-injury and help us to understand why we currently have this epidemiological and societal crisis. Dr. Aguirre.
All right. Well, I've been given, I think, 7 minutes, and the thought that I'd be able to keep my remarks to 7 minutes is a laugh from most of my staff and colleagues. So let me just tell you how I get here. So 10 years ago, seeing the rising tide of suicidality in young people, we decided to open up a dedicated unit to just treat young people who are extremely suicidal. And sadly, my program has continued to grow. And in that time, we've treated about 1,300 of the most suicidal young people, not only in the United States, but around the world. Now, our research, historical research, said that about 10% of those would die by suicide because there was such extreme suicidality. And in that time, we've lost 6 young women to death by suicide. And one of the dearest was, we have Lynn Curry, who is the mom of one of the kids that we lost, who's just been a massive advocate for this. But nevertheless, 6 is about 0.5%. So we've seen these reductions. Now, the standard of care historically used to be that young people would go into the hospital, say that they were no longer suicidal, and then get discharged. And then there was just this repetition of in and out of the hospital. And in many cases, actually, it made the problem of suicidality even worse. So we started to look at risk factors. What we recognized is that there were like all these behaviors. There's self-injury that Dr. Frizzetti talked about, risky sexual behavior, substance use, and everything. So these kids would come into units to get treatment for those things. But what we realized was that wasn't the problem. The problem was that they were using these behaviors to actually address what the real problem was. So we were targeting self-injury and substance use and other things like that, when what we needed to be doing was targeting difficulty in regulating how they felt in the moment. So it turned out that what we considered a problem, which is these behaviors, actually for many of the young people that we saw was actually a solution to the problem of how they felt in the moment. So if you think about it, I mean, when a child doesn't know what to do with incredible stress and intense emotions, it's not that they wake up and think, oh, I should self-injure. That's the last thing that they want to do. But when you don't know what to do, you do something that is going to have very quick effects. And so drugs, risky behavior, self-injury often have the kinds of effects in the brain that will rapidly calm a person down. So really, here's the first thing that I want to say, and that is that the best time to influence a child is 10 years before they even get to see me. The best time to influence is 10 years before they get to see me. Because what happens is that when they've practiced these behaviors time after time, these behaviors get set in pathways that then become entrenched. And it is much more difficult to change those pathways when you're 18 years old than when you're 4, 5, or 6 years old. And as a psychiatrist who has dedicated my life to suicidal behavior, seeing 2 or 3 very suicidal patients a week can really begin to take its toll. But if you take those resources and say, rather than see 2 or 3, we can start teaching kids when they're much younger you get a tremendous economy of scale, because 2 or 3 cases, it helps the individual, but it doesn't even begin to make a dent in the problem. So so what we needed to do is teach the very skills that we're teaching to very suicidal young people to grade schoolers and preschoolers. And we know that the brain learns by repetition. The more you do something, the better you get at that thing. And think about the preposterous idea of saying, okay, we're going to go to Spain in next year, and that the first time you learn how to speak Spanish is when you land in Madrid. I was going to say Barcelona, but I think that are they Catalonia? I don't know. But that's not the time to learn Spanish. The time to learn Spanish is a year before you get there, so that by the time you get there, you know what to do. The time to teach skills is way before you even need to get them. So here's the other thing: is that at schools we emphasize physical wellness, but we don't emphasize mental wellness. And the skills that we teach are actually mental wellness skills. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, and sort of the second point, people often ask me about what the role of social media and electronics are. Now here's the thing: is we're not going to get rid of social media. We're not going to get rid of electronics. We have to learn how to live with them. But the thing is that the brain has evolved and is exquisitely wired to read facial emotions and do it in real time. Even a mild delay by texting someone that you're pissed off at them is very different from telling them directly to their face. So the thing is that if kids, like for those of us who are older, before all of this, learn how to regulate because we engaged with our parents and older people in this way, that is not something that is going on today. So that's why we need to teach it as a curriculum. But the second thing is this, and that is, the single most powerful force for healing and suicide prevention is sort of like a vaccination for suicide prevention is love and connection. And there's a paradox then like when my son has do you have 5,000 friends on Facebook? I don't know. But anyway, I mean, like the idea of having 5,000 friends just boggles the mind. How can you be connected in this sort of way? And yet there's this paradox of connectedness. And the kids who come to our unit are feeling much more isolated. And this isolation kills as well. And that love is absolutely important. And actually, this ability to play non-purposefully, without any goal, face-to-face, real-time, that this connection of love plus the skills added together make this powerful, powerful prevention for suicide in later days. It's the vaccination that children need to get over and over again. And so, how do you teach skills? So just to say that this last thing, and that is, on our unit, we use a system of care called Dialectical behavior therapy. And it teaches emotion regulation skills, distress tolerance skills, interpersonal effectiveness skills, mindfulness skills. So the curriculum based on ancient wisdom, by the way, if you sleep well and eat well and exercise, you feel better than when you don't. Okay, ancient wisdom. Together with modern cognitive behavioral skills, put it together as a powerful system and lends itself to a didactic curriculum that has powerful effects. But there are other technologies out there, and I'm sure that others that could teach these kinds of techniques. But what we know about DBT per se is that it leads to reductions in suicidal and self-injurious rates. So that's why we think it's a nice model, for example, for teaching these in a certain diluted way, perhaps, to younger people. So, to the extent that we can think about how do we begin to implement these things now in schools, so that 10 years from now, this rising wave of suicidality can end, and that we don't have to face this. But without doing that, without teaching these skills much earlier on, it is my opinion that we'll continue to see this problem. That's all I have to say. Thanks.